Hi, thank you for watching. This is another brief tutorial on VinylMaster Pro. Today we're going to learn how to install and connect to the cutter. This cutter and program are very easy for installing the cutter. Simply we're going to turn the machine on and off and the computer will auto detect the cutter. There are no drivers to install, so the cutter uses drivers that are embedded in Windows. We are going to set the blade offset. We're going to recommend a 0.4 millimeter blade offset for 60-degree carbide blades. We're going to set the over travel to 2 millimeters. Over travel is the distance that your cutter will cut past the start point of a loop, and that's to make sure that it cuts through the point that it started at. We're going to set the program to cut in strips. So cutting in strips allows you to cut a certain distance, all of the entities within that distance, before the cutter moves on to another distance. So we're going to set it for about 12 inches. So we'll cut basically a foot of material. Then the cutter will roll through that 12 inches and cut the next foot. Then it'll roll that 12 and then cut the next 12 inches, and so on and so forth until it gets through the entire image. We're going to do a calibration example, and we will do a test rectangle to set that calibration, and I'll show you how to do that. So first thing we're going to do, I've removed the cutter from the system here so I can show you how to add a cutter. When you first install the software will ask you your cutter. You will likely have a 1350 II, which is a 48-inch servo. If you haven't done that, then the way to install the cutter is through Tools, Plugins and Modules, the Vinyl Spooler. So the Vinyl Spooler will give you control of your cutter and allow you to add new cutters. So if we go under this cutter heading up here, you'll see we can install a cutter driver. And I'm going to pick the 1350 II right here. I'm going to say install, and it's been installed. Now, although it's installed, the computer doesn't know what port it's on. So I'm going to plug my cutter into the computer through the USB connection, and I'm going to turn the cutter on. And you might hear the connection sound. You might hear the cutter in the background turning on. So underneath here where it says connection in the vinyl spooler, you'll see there's the cutter, direct USB port. The USB port itself is blank to start. So I'm going to hit this detect button. And what it does here is it goes through an auto detection algorithm. It's going to say turn off the device. So I'm going to turn the power switch off. And you might have heard that disconnect. It noticed something turned off. It's going to say turn it on. So I'm going to turn the power switch back on. And it's going to give me this green check mark. And what it's doing is it's monitoring all the input output ports, and when it finds a device that just popped up when it was waiting, it connects to that device. So if you just turned on your cutter, it's going to think that's the cutter and it's going to connect to it, and that's the direct connection port. And so it found it, green check mark, good. We're going to say done, and if you see, it puts the port in there. So I'm going to hit done, and that connects the cutter to the computer, and we did install the cutter driver. But like I said, if you have the when you do the initial software install, you can select the cutter at that time as well. So next what we want to do is we want to set blade offset, set over travel. The blade offset, the over travel, and the calibration entries are all done in a similar place. We're going to go back to the vinyl spooler under Tools, Plugins and Modules, Vinyl Spooler. And in Vinyl Spooler, we can go to Cutter and Configure Cutter. And under Configure Cutter, all the settings for the cutter are going to come up. If we go here to All Settings, we can see them all, and we're going to expand these little plus signs to get everything to show here. Okay, so here this shows you the overcut is sent to 0.079 inches, which is approximately 2 millimeters, and that's good. That's what we want for overcut, about 2 millimeters. It should default to that. The blade offset, we're looking for about 0.4 millimeters. So this is actually in inches right now. So I'm going to convert 0.4 into inches, and I get about 0.015. So I'm going to change this 0.012 to 0.0157, which is 0.4. It rounds up to 0.016. So that's where I can set my blade offset. There's a couple other places in the software to do this as well, but these are all the settings. Here are the calibration factors. So these numbers are in units per inch. So there's 1016 units per inch in X and Y. For the plotter, X is the direction of length into the material, and Y is across the width. So we have a positive XYZ right-handed coordinate system with X as your thumb, pointing that back into the vinyl. That's positive X. Y would be your pointer finger pointing to the left of the cutter. So Y goes from right to left, and then Z is up out of the page. So when we update our calibration factors, these are the factors we're talking about right in here. And I'll show you how to update that in just a second. So here we're going to say accept to accept our blade offset setting that we just updated. I'm going to say accept. I'm going to say done for now. So we set the blade offset to 0.4 millimeters. We set the over travel. Set program to cut in strips. So when we send that's also when we send something to the cutter, and I can send this text to the cutter just for fun. I'm going to say cut now. It's going to pull up the vinyl spooler again, and what you'll see here under cut options, you've got this option right here for cut in strips. So by default this is turned off, and it's important we want to turn it on. When we turn it on, it comes up at 11.811 inches. Is approximately 12 inches. I believe it's 300 millimeters converted. So let's keep that at 11.81 inches. Our blade offset, now it's actually showing up in millimeters, 0.41, which we set before. Our overcut is set here at 2 millimeters. Okay, so that takes care of cutting in strips. Send a test rectangle, and an example of a calibration entry. So these cutters are important that we get the length right on this material. Width is almost always not a problem. Length, depending on the drag of your material, wear in the rollers, pressure on the pinch rollers, so on and so forth. If you send a 120-inch cut, you might not get exactly 120 inches. You might get 119.9 or something like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to send a rectangle, and the rectangle that I'm going to send is going to be a nice long one. So I'm just going to make a square here, or a square rectangle, using this rectangle tool. And you can change the actual size of this up here. So if I select the rectangle, you see how in the top here the dimensions of the rectangle show up. I'm going to make this rectangle 24 inches wide and 120 inches long. Okay, so in order to get this rectangle to behave the way I'm looking for, the first thing I need to do is I need to turn off the proportionality. And what this will do is it will allow me to change the X and the Y independently. So that's what this lock button does. So I'm going to hit that button to unlock it so I can get back to 24 inch by 120 inch. So now this rectangle is 24 inch by 120 inch. Now what I want to do is I want to send that rectangle to the cutter with my template material in there. I know it's exactly 24 inch by 120 inch by design. So I'm going to send it, and the cutter will cut it using cut in strips. And it's important that we have that cut in strips set. So it does that in 12-inch increments. And after I send it the first time, I'm going to bring it back to the start point, move it over, move the blade over a little bit, maybe an inch, and maybe an inch into the material, and send it again. Then I'm going to bring it back to the start point again, move it over another inch, and move it in another inch, and send it again. So I'm going to send it 3 times. And what we want to do is we want to take 3 length measurements of this rectangle. So we know they're all supposed to be 120 inches, and we actually recommend using as accurate a tape measure as you can get your hands on. We've used a Starrett certified tape measure for these. And so let's assume that after we send it, it comes in and it's not exactly 120 inches. We take 3 rectangles, we cut them and we measure them, and we get 119.7, 119.8, and 119.9. So what we want to do is we want to take an average of these test cuts. So an average is 119.7 plus 119.8 plus 119.9 over 3. We get 119.8 as the average of the test cuts. Our scale factor, since we know this is supposed to be 120 inches, it's 120 over 119.8 times the 1016 that I showed you earlier for pulses per inch, and we'll get 1017.696 and some additional digits, and then we're going to round this to 1017.70. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this 1017.70, going back to my vinyl spooler, tools, plugins and modules, vinyl spooler. I'm going back to where those settings were, under cutter, configure cutter, all settings, expand these out so you can see all the settings. So here's that length. Remember I mentioned X is the length, 1016. So we want to change that 1016 to 1017.7, 1017.70. You'll see here that the X units per millimeter also adjusted. This is just another way to enter the same information. So if you change this, this will change automatically. If you change this, then this one will change automatically. So now that this is changed, I say accept. And as a final check, I'll want to send that rectangle one more time and measure it again, and it should be pretty close to 120 inches within within some tolerance and some variation. So that is how you enter the calibration factors. If you have any trouble with any of these issues, please contact tech support for additional assistance. Thank you.